This is a series of films that tells the history of contemporary fashion photography as seen through the eyes of models. Amber, thank you very much for coming and joining the Subjective series. As I'm trying to explain, it's a series where we talk to models about their experience of doing fashion photography, in the end to build up a very full picture of fashion photography and the history of fashion photography, but not seen just from the photographer's point of view, but from the model's point of view. So that's why we're here. So we were talking a little bit earlier on just about how the industry has changed over the years. When I first started in the end of the 70s, it was a lot more unorganized, chaotic, more, in some ways more artistic, because there wasn't this feeling that it was about business. It was about self-expression. And how do you think that's changed from then to now, or at least from your early experience? When did you start in this actually? Let's go back to that point.
The early I started I think I was 15 years old, so
right.
It was actually not even it would have been, I think, 89 or something.
Yeah.
And then I left home at 17.
Right.
And so it was 91 and started really modeling then.
Yeah.
And the industry was very different.
And where did you start? So what was your first sorts of jobs?
My first place I started was in Milan. And when I was 15, I was discovered in Oklahoma in a small agency that you actually had to pay to take classes to be a model.
Excellent.
Which was quite hilarious because one of the things they taught us was mannequin modeling.
So what's mannequin modeling?
It's popping and locking it on a box and in like a department store.
Really?
Like you're there
so
for like 6
mannequin.
hours and you're a living
You're kidding?
No, and we would get paid for this. I hope somebody somewhere has a recording of it because it's hilarious.
But is that a thing that they're doing now? Which
the mannequin challenge, which makes me laugh because we were getting paid for that.
So I know they're going to do that tonight at the British Fashion Awards.
I heard.
So you'll be very good at it. We were all watching you.
Yeah, and we were, so we paid to take classes, and a scout found me, and I went to Milan for the summer.
Yeah.
Because another girl from my town and her mom were going.
Right.
So my mom allowed me to go.
Right, okay. So
not having known, I didn't know anything about fashion. I didn't look at fashion magazines. I didn't wear makeup. I knew nothing.
So what got you into it? Why, if you knew nothing about the world, there must be something must have drawn you towards it.
Well, my mom had put me in those classes because everybody said, oh, she should model or she should act. Yeah. And I was a bit of a ham and liked, we wrote plays and did things like that. So I wasn't, I wasn't like a wallflower. I was always performing. And then, but I wasn't really concerned with beauty.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go on an adventure, so I begged my mom to let me go.
Right.
And I did some tests, and I had a really good time, and within 2 weeks I started working. Yeah. And I never stopped working.
And how was Milan at the time?
So Milan at the time was, I don't know that it was the, important place it is today, but it was becoming more and more important. And the big photographer there was Fabrizio Ferri, who had Industria.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
the biggest studio in the world.
It was the biggest, I mean, it was so cool to be there. And I just started out like really at the bottom, doing the local magazines and weekly magazines, and started learning how to be a model. Right. And I cried on my first shoot because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And then once I figured out that I really enjoyed performing and finding the nuances and being allowed to find a character or just play, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and I realized that I was good at it.
Yeah, and for a 15-year-old girl in Milan, was it safe? That's a strange question to ask you, but did you feel it? Did you feel safe, or did you feel it?
I felt safe, but I was also, not going. And there was places that were called. There were these girls who were dancing for dollars. Okay. Models would go kind of outside of Milan to these clubs and get paid to dance. Right. But with appropriate with clothes on, I think. But but I think there was just a bunch of young guys hanging out, or probably some old guys. Yeah. So there were things that were shady, but I didn't get involved in anything like that. I mean, I did what most 15-year-olds would do when they're in Europe. I did go to some clubs and dance and kissed a couple of male models and things like that, but nothing like that. It wasn't until a little bit later that things changed and I got in more trouble. But I saw the industry in a very different way because we were, you know, the big models were Christy, Linda, and Naomi.
Right.
But I had no idea who those women were, and I didn't know who the big photographers were. So I really got to grow as a model and learn and become educated rather than just thrust into something. Yeah. Which I think a lot of girls today are really thrust into something. But the industry has totally changed. Yeah.
If you were starting in Milan and you were starting off doing sort of, as you said, kind of like fairly kind of low-level modelling, sounds horrible, but how quickly before you were doing international campaigns, and what was the first big break? Was your first, which you would consider your big break?
I think when I left home at 17, I did. I worked for French Elle. I had moved to Paris. Right. And I worked for French Elle, and Hans Feuer gave me the cover of French Elle. Yeah. And I think that was probably one of the biggest breaks that at least just got me in the door with some people like Stephen Meisel or actually it was probably more got me into the fashion shows, because I think that's what actually broke my career. Right, right. At the time, at the time, I had long hair, or actually a really bad bob. Right. And I worked with Julian Dees on a fragrance, and said to him, and I had just done all that French Elle stuff, and said, I think I should cut my hair short. Yeah. Meanwhile, no one had short hair in the business. Right. And he said, no, not a, you know, kind of put me off. And then he asked me how old I was. Yeah. And I told him, and he was like, he thought I was like 8 years older than, because of this silly adult haircut I had. And he said, we'll cut it, but not right now, obviously, because we're at this job. When I see you next. Well, then I bumped into him doing a casting for Claude Montana. Right. And he said, let's go cut your hair. So him and Ward went back to my apartment, because Ward was assisting him then. Yeah. And we cut all my hair off into that famous waif pixie haircut. Yeah. And that is what broke my career at 18. Right. And then, I mean, literally from day to night, it changed. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I'm going to show you a picture. Okay. One of the first. This campaign. Mm-hmm. Tell me about working with Richard Avedon, because this is Richard Avedon. What date was this? What are we looking at here? I think we're looking at about 1994, maybe? Yeah. Maybe 93, 94. I can fact check it for you. But I think somewhere around there. I had actually gone to Dick's studio maybe a month or two before, and he did a test. And they were testing an idea out where they were going to just shoot my face different ways, different emotional expressions. Yeah. And then when we were going to go to do the campaign, they were going to put them, like, make masks of these images. Really? Right. I showed up to the shoot, and which, by the way, was a week long, which you never get to do now. No, I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And also the size of the production was amazing, because it was tiny, and again, that doesn't happen today. No, they seem to have it completely the wrong way around. They give you no time to do anything, and they have a huge, like 30 people on set. Yeah. And you know, it was Donatella, her, maybe, you know, 1 or 2 people from her team, Joe, McKenna the stylist, Guido, and Francois, no assistants. Yeah. And Dick had his small team, the choreographer, the woman who ran his office, who I'm forgetting her name now, and maybe 2 assistants. Right. I mean, that was literally the sum total. So you said the choreographer. I'm very keen to find out what a choreographer did. We'll get to her. We'll get to her. But I showed up to the shoot, and they said, hey, Dick came up to me and he said, we're not going to do the idea that that you came in and tested for. And he had this stack of cut images from a contact sheet. Right. And he said, we're not going to use this. Do you want these? Right. And I was like, okay. Meanwhile, I still didn't quite, I mean, I knew he was important, but I didn't know how important he was. And was this the first time you worked with Richard Avedon? Was it the very first time? Had I done something else? I had done a group, a couple of maybe Versus with some other girls, but alone, this was the first time. Right. I knew he was important, but I didn't really know the magnitude, because I was so young. I don't know if you can understand that at that age. So he gave me this stack of like 50 pictures. Some he had used a red wax marker or pen through.
Sonograph, yeah.
And there were like 4 different hair and makeup looks. Thank God I kept a hold of those.
Yeah,
I finally framed them. But anyway, so we ended
up...
Sure,
his estate's going bananas.
I'm sure. He actually signed Polaroids for me,
heard, yeah.
Princess Versace. He was so generous.
Yeah, yeah.
He was so generous. And Guido had said, let's go get some books. And I was like, okay. I wasn't collecting, you know, things like that. But I was like, okay. Got one of his amazing old books that Truman Capote had wrote the intro to, and had him sign it, and thank God for Guido, because I would have never done anything like that, and thank God over the years I saved all of that stuff, some of which...
It's funny how the things slip through our fingers, isn't it? Things you don't realise you take for granted, and all of a sudden they've gone, or one didn't do what one would have liked to have done.
Yeah, completely. But this shoot was incredible, because he really... he was looking for personality, and they really wanted me to be me, and they let me do whatever I wanted. And we had the choreographer there, but we hardly used her. Right.
So this picture where you're kicking, what was the instruction? What did Dick say to you at this point? Was he saying, "Will you do this," or was it you improvising and offering?
You know, I think we probably, because of the skirt, needed some movement.
Right.
And so. You know, maybe they were like, you know, do some sort of jump or kick, and that's how it started. But this whole kind of allowing me to be me, there was also a little bit of a, you know, simplicity and rawness and kind of youthfulness to it.
Right.
And so they, you know, at the time I was, you know, still am. I was, you know, a little sporty and a little tomboy, so they let me kind of show that side of myself, playful.
And can you remember at the session what camera he was working on? It's a real photographer's question.
It was the, what camera did he use? Well, he used the big 8x10 to set the to do the Polaroid. Would he shot the same thing?
Yeah, he probably would have.
I think he did.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the sort of photography kind of or photographers sort of. Things that one aspires to is to shoot an 8x10 because Avedon did, Penn did.
And wasn't it upside down when you saw the image for him?
Yeah, it depends if he had an idiot back on it or not.
I don't know if he
There's a back that you put on it which turns it the right way up, so you don't have to do this and you don't.
He always was under that cape.
Okay, so by the time we got to me, I was working on 10/8, you had a back that turned things the right way up, and you didn't have a cape. I never liked the idea of going under a cape.
Yeah.
It always seemed a little bit kind of too fusty and disappearing on this thing, but he used to be under a cape.
Yeah.
So I guess it's whatever works.
Yeah.
But later.
I'm not sure those first images that I did with him when we were testing the mask. I think those might have been shot because he was very, very close.
Right.
And I was doing a lot of different expressions quite quickly. Yeah. So I would have thought that would have been on
Hasselblad or Rolleiflex or something.
Yes.
Right.
Definitely. Definitely, because I remember a lot of people were at that time kind of copying his cameras, the young photographers.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing that people think that they'll get the image if they use the same camera.
Yeah.
Weird. I once went to Avedon Archive and I was, Michael Avedon, who's his grandson, was saying to me, do you want to hold his camera? I thought, well, I never thought about that. And they gave me his Hasselblad to hold and to look through. And on half of it was really strangely normal, because of course I'm used to looking at into a camera, so it's yet another camera, a little bit more dusty than I'm used to. On the other hand, you think, well, everybody, you know, the Kennedys, he must have seen through this, and Marilyn Monroe, and kind of, you know, all the kind of, so it was a slight odd moment. But what was he like to work with? Was he very shouty, or very quiet, or very, what was his sort of character? How did he get the energy that's clearly in all his work?
He had a great energy. Richard was so nice, to me anyway. He was super nice. You know, I remember him, you know, he would just kind of yell out, okay, kick higher, do this, do that. Great. He was so present in what he was doing. Yeah. He loved what he was doing. Yeah. There wasn't a dull moment. And, you know, he was already well into probably his 70s.
All right.
How old was he when he died?
Fact check it. Rob, how old was Richard Avedon when he died? I don't think he was that old.
Or maybe he was 60, only 60s.
60. I think Penn was in his 90s when he died. And Avedon was probably
only 75 or something, right? So he wouldn't even have been that old. He was probably 60 something.
Yeah.
Well, he was a spry little thing, and so he was full of energy.
I mean, that's certainly the impression I've had from talking to other models who've worked with him, that you get this idea. It's quite a small frame, so it's quite a small man, but you know, bounding around and jumping around.
He was very spry.
Yeah.
And just full of energy, and he loved what he was doing. There was nothing. I mean, how many times had he seen something like, not this exact image, but you know, it wasn't the first girl that he had photographed, but you know, you did feel special. And one of the things I really loved about him is he just allowed me to do whatever I wanted.
Right.
And at one point I did, there's a picture, they actually put it in the catalog, of me flipping off the camera with my tongue sticking out and a crown, a Versace diamond crown.
Excellent.
And it just, as a kid, I mean, at that age, you know, you want to let it all out, you want to be rebellious.
Yeah. So just on another sort of slightly kind of nerdy level, was the music playing?
If there was, I don't remember.
Right. Different photographers work in different ways, as you well know. Some are very...
it would definitely not have been like pop.
Right. What do you think it would have been if it was anything at all?
That's a really good question. I feel like it would have been something more like dramatic and something fast, but more classical.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm just, you know, putting that on him.
Music's such an important part.
But I do not remember music.
And do you remember, is there a photographer who you do associate with music? Do you think, oh, if I work with so-and-so, it'll be a soundtrack?
Stephen Meisel always uses music.
Right. I'd heard that. We'll talk about Stephen in a minute. I mean, I always feel that music's such an important thing. And I believe that Stephen Meisel uses music as almost under the set, so the girls can feel the vibrations of the speaker.
Absolutely.
That's why I wanted to say.
His is much... He's more than anyone I remember. I could actually name songs.
Yeah, really.
Anybody else that I can't really remember any music.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was music, and even with you, I'm sure we did.
Sure.
Because we did a lot of dancing and movement.
Yeah. I need music.
Oh, I actually do know, Craig and you both.
Right.
I do remember your music now.
Good.